Another former NFL head coach is on the way to Ohio State, and the Buckeyes have a new offensive coordinator. Welcome to Snap Judgments on 97.1 The Fan and 10 TV. That is Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Ward, and Arthur Smith is the new offensive coordinator for the Buckeyes. Checking off all of those boxes that we've been talking about for about 7 weeks, Birm, with NFL experience, long-time tenured guy with run game background, and maybe not the most glowing NFL resume, sort of like Matt Patricia about 1 year ago at this time. So fits that mold that we've been talking about, that profile that Ryan Day has been looking for. And now this deal is done. A little bit of a surprise in that wasn't a candidate that was maybe front of mind, but neither was Matt Patricia a year ago.
Yeah, he wasn't a candidate that was front of mind because he just lost his job in Pittsburgh 2 weeks ago. So it's not like there was a whole lot of time to figure it out, but it's why Ryan Day was being so patient, because he knew that there were going to be NFL offensive coordinators who became available. And this is not just an NFL offensive coordinator. He's a guy who's been a coordinator. Sure, he's a coordinator the last 2 years with the Pittsburgh Steelers, but he's also a former NFL head coach when he was just 39 years old. Regardless of the success, regardless of the results, like the fact that he was in that position at 39 years old says a lot about who Arthur Smith is, not just as a coach, but as a guy who's an organizer, as a leader, someone who people follow. He's another coach coming into Columbus with a young family. So like you look at the things that kind of make sense for Ohio State building a culture that lasts. They don't really want the 1 year rental guys. And so when you have someone who's 43, 3 young kids, like you can start to see how him and Matt Patricia and Ryan Day and all of the other coaches at Ohio State work together. And that is a lure for Columbus, because this is a guy who loves the college game. He hasn't been in it in a while, but he's, as you said, a run-first guy who gives Ohio State a little bit of that attitude that Chip Kelly and Justin Fry had. And so now you get somebody else to work alongside Tyler Bowen, who, as a former offensive coordinator himself, there's different minds, mentalities, and approaches that those guys can work on. And then you still have the pass side of the offense with Ryan Day and Billy Fessler and Keenan Bailey, Cortez Hankton. I think it's a great fit. I know people are going to look at the results in the way the Steelers' offense was and all that. I don't know. I don't blame an NFL offense coordinator for his offense not being good when they don't have receivers and stuff like that. So it's certainly an interesting.
Hold on, not just receivers. When they were cycling through some of the worst quarterbacking situations in the entirety of the NFL over the last 5 years, but he was only there for 2 of them. And
yeah, I mean that's
Aaron Rodgers.
Go back to his
Russell
time.
Wilson.
Yeah.
Like, what are we? That's insane. So
and that's true for his time with the Atlanta Falcons as well. I mean, the Falcons obviously now are a little bit better at the quarterback position, but his years there didn't really have anybody that you could count on as his quarterback. He dealt with, Justin Fields and Russell Wilson and all that chaos in Pittsburgh, and then the Aaron Rodgers, and you don't know if it's Aaron Rodgers. You don't know what you're going to get, but you certainly can see why this is the right fit for Ohio State. And now, like Matt Patricia a year ago, we'll find out how it actually plays out. I'm sure that there will be a large percentage of the fan base that are Steelers fans and say, "Oh, screw this guy," or Browns fans and say, "Oh, screw this guy," because they thought he stunk for the Steelers and they wanted him to stay in Pittsburgh. I don't know, but it's a good fit for Ohio State, and clearly Ryan Day did not waste a whole lot of time moving on Arthur Smith once he became available.
Yeah, so this feels so similar to me to Matt Patricia a year ago, and that's why I need to maybe adjust my immediate snap judgment, my instant evaluation of what's going to work or not work. I do remember one thing that I said about the hiring of Matt Patricia, which is that if you're taking an NFL head coach and someone with all that level of experience coordinating, putting together game plans, and trying to find success and having some success, maybe not every single week at the highest level of football, you can probably step down to college football in Ohio State and then work with the talent that's on hand there and find a lot of success. Like the question that we had a year ago, and it didn't even wind up really being all that relevant, was like, how can Matt Patricia develop relationships? What would he do as a recruiter? Is he going to want to be around long term? Like none of those things actually wound up mattering. And the perception was, well, he's prickly. He's coming from the Bill Belichick tree. I don't really know what Arthur Smith's personal relationships are like. I've never met him. I've never talked to him, just like I hadn't Matt Patricia. And that was the biggest concern that we had a year ago about that hiring. And it wound up to be completely unfounded. So it's not as if Ryan Day would rush to any conclusion here if someone is not going to fit in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center, not going to be able to enhance.
Looks like we've got a little freezing situation for Austin. I think the thing that I'm going to say while you're frozen is that the culture fit of this relationship, of this choice, is, I think, more clear to me than anything else, because Ryan Day will figure out a way to make sure that they work from a personnel standpoint and a chemistry standpoint as far as offense or, run game, pass game. But if Ryan Day wasn't sure that Arthur Smith was the right fit from a culture standpoint, from an interview standpoint, as a guy that people will want to play for standpoint, then this doesn't happen. So, and to what you brought up earlier, like we didn't know what Matt Patricia would be required to do as a recruiter, et cetera. We know that Chip Kelly and Jim Knowles certainly didn't have to do a lot of that, but Arthur Smith is not going to come in and be a full-time accountable assistant coach on the recruiting trail, because the Buckeyes are not moving on from any of their other assistants. So it does change things in a very unique way. Ohio State will be the first team, I think, in the country to do this. It's definitely amongst the Blue Buds, to say, hey, our offensive coordinator doesn't need to recruit. So now Arthur Smith will only be recruiting when he's on campus. But that's still plenty of time. That's all the camps in the summer. That's guys who get to come in and work with him and work with a former NFL head coach. I think it's a great fit. Again, we're going to look at the results and say, well, what are those in a year from now? But I think if you look at Arthur Smith's NFL tenure as a head coach, he was 7-10 3 straight years for the Atlanta Falcons in his time there. I'm a Cincinnati Bengals fan. If the Bengals could finish 7-10 3 straight years, their coach will never be fired. So like it was just a personal decision, I think, down there.
Don't do that, Birm. Don't do that.
But I think it's a really good fit. And I guess we're going to find out. We've been really, really fortunate in these last few years when it comes to getting to know these new coaches that come in. And we were blown away by Chip Kelly when we finally got a chance to talk to him in the team room and see what he was about as a coach. We've been blown away by Matt Patricia, Jim Knowles, and the way his brain worked and the way he handled things. I think Arthur Smith is going to meet all of those expectations, because I don't think Ryan Day would have hired him otherwise.
Yeah. That was what I was building up to right there. It doesn't, and part of the difficulty, if we're trying to make immediate reactions to these hires, is that if you're being involved with former NFL head coaches or coordinator candidates currently at the NFL level, which Arthur Smith was still interviewing for multiple jobs. Matt Patricia has been pursued for multiple jobs. If you go back to 2 years ago to Bill O'Brien or Chip Kelly, when you're trying to fill these spots, there's gonna be some holes on the resume, or at least things that you can question. And that's the product of playing and coaching at the highest level. You don't win every single game. It is designed for parity. And none of this is to say Arthur Smith is absolutely going to work at the same rate that Matt Patricia did last year with a historically dominant Ohio State defense. But, there's only a handful of coaches that win every single year at the NFL level. And even Bill Belichick got run out of town at the end. He's the most successful of them of all time. It's very difficult to win. So you're going to be able to critique it. You're going to be able to pick it apart just the same way that we were with Matt Patricia with the Lions. This is a different level of football. And I think it comes down to more, can you handle that organization? Because what Ryan Day wants is a head coach of the offense so that he doesn't have to lead those meetings. He doesn't have to be holding the play sheet on Saturdays in the fall for Ohio State. Doesn't have to worry about what the 3rd and 5 calls are going to be. Arthur Smith has done all of those things before. Is he going to be really good with the Buckeyes? I don't know. We're going to find out in September, the first time that he's out there or up in the press box with me at the Horseshoe. That's all going to be determined. But the things that separate him as a candidate for this job or the organization, and whether the other candidates, like Brian Dable was also interviewing for some of these coordinator jobs that Arthur Smith was up for, I believe, with the Titans just last week. So that was someone that we talked about. But what can you bring to the run game? How can you enhance that? Because as you mentioned before, Ryan Day, Billy Fessler, and Keenan Bailey are all going to have some of the knowledge of what Ohio State wants to do with its passing attack. and we know where the deficiencies were in the last 2 games. And again, I don't want to put all of that on the offensive line specifically or Tyler Bowen or anybody else. I think there's a lot of blame that we can spread around for those losses. But if that is the strength for Arthur Smith, that's probably what elevated his resume over the others that Ryan Day was considering.
Yeah, because again, it is fairly simple math. Like an NFL head coach is going to be a better college coach than 99% of college coaches. Like there's a reason he's been in the NFL for the last decade plus. Like the things that we are going to critique and the things that people are going to question are like, hey, well, the Steelers offense was kind of crappy. Hey, the Falcons offense, they had Drake London and Kyle Pitts and Bijan Robinson for that final, stretch for him. And they still, but as the NFL head coach, you're not in charge of creating your roster. You're not in charge of any of that stuff. So I think you have to take that with a grain of salt. I think you just look at a guy like Arthur Smith and you say, this is a good fit because he fits what Ohio State wants culture-wise. He fits the age of the offensive group. I think the most important thing is that he does not have to coordinate the Ohio State passing game. That is Ryan Day's job. So now, when we look at Matt Patricia and you say, well, how can
it can't be his.
It's at least going to have a lot of his voice.
I know, right? But it's going to have his influence because as long as he's there, that's part of it. But I think we can't have it both ways. Like if we're going to talk about this with Ryan Day being the CEO and he thinks that Keenan Bailey and Billy Fessler can implement what he wants, like that's different. I think he needs to remove himself. That's the point of bringing in someone like Arthur Smith and paying him at the level that we think that he's going to be. We don't know what that contract looks like as we sit here right now, but like we can't say that Ryan Day is going to be the coordinator of the passing attack because that's part of the issue, right?
Right. Well, I mean, it's his passing game that will be implemented alongside the changes and adjustments Arthur Smith makes in the run game. So
sure.
Who's directing it for him? That's Billy Fessler. That is Cortez Hankton. That's Keenan Bailey. I understand. My point is that when we were looking ahead at how will we evaluate Matt Patricia, it's like he comes in and he is the head coach of the defense, period. Yep. I don't know that ultimately any offensive coordinator is going to be given all of that authority and all of that power as the head coach of the offense. I expect that will be a major part of this because that's why you aren't having him coach a position as well. Like he's not coming in as the offensive coordinator / quarterbacks coach. He's the offensive coordinator. So certainly this will be a new approach for Ryan Day. And so I'm interested to see how that happens because sometimes when you take new approaches, you get great results, right? Like I've been getting great results on Awaken180weightloss.com. I've lost over 30 pounds. I'm under 200 pounds for the first time since I was 21 years old. And I have lost 30 plus pounds in the last 5.5 weeks using Awaken180weightloss.com. They have great coaching. They have a really intuitive, easy to use app that keeps me on track. The scale keeps shedding pounds. I feel great. Ohio State should feel great about this hire. And I'm interested in how this is going to be responded to in the fan base because, again, there are so many people that have an opinion based on their NFL fan affiliation that are like tied to Ohio State because those are similar fans of Ohio State. So it is going to be interesting. Like with Matt Patricia, it's like, well, he failed in Detroit. Nobody liked him. Everyone thought he was, grumpy and cantankerous. And then he gets to town and it's like, actually, maybe it was just those crazy fans up in Michigan that had soured our view. Or
the ownership of the Lions.
Right. Or that, for example. So it's just an interesting fit because it's not a name we'd heard. But if we're being honest, well, we hadn't really heard any names at all until the last 3 days. So, I mean, Ryan Day really cranked up the energy here to get this done and to knock it out now before the Buckeyes really deep dive into their winter workouts. I think it gives him an opportunity to come in early, get a sense of what he has and what works. But I think the most important thing and the part that has to be underscored is that this is a guy who will work very closely with Tyler Bowen on the offensive line. This is a guy who was a college offensive lineman at North Carolina. He understands the run game. And if you can meld what he is really successful at with the run game and combine that with the Ohio State passing game, I think you have a potential for a really good fit here. And now we have to figure out personality wise, does he fit as well? And I contend that Ryan Day would not have made this decision if he didn't think that was the case. Should we talk about the other coaching hire that happened this weekend? The other staff hire?
Schlegs needs no introduction.
Anthony Schlegel back with the Buckeyes, the juice bringer, full time this time, right? Like that's big news for Schlegs.
It is. really happy for him. Um, I know he can speak on that more eloquently and passionately than either of us can, but we've known him for a long time. We know what intensity he can bring in the weight room. He's already worked in there multiple times, once in that full-time capacity, right when I first started covering Ohio State, or we both did, and then in a limited basis in the last couple of years, just helping out in the offseason. Um, this sets the table for, I think, just to get ahead of things. At some point, Mickey Marotti will not be the strength coach at Ohio State. And if Anthony Schlegel becomes that, that's a win for Ohio State. And I think that now we're at that point where I think some of the contract job description negotiations with Schlegs, I can't speak directly for him or for Ryan Day or Mick in that regard, but this was that point where it's like, if you'd like to do this at some point, now is the time to get in and lay that foundation. So I love it. I'm excited to see Schlegs around the Woody a lot more. The results, I think, speak for themselves. I think that this makes perfect sense for Ohio State, for Schlegs, for Mick, for Ryan Day, for everybody else. Find me one person who has worked around Anthony Schlegel and not come away more fired up with better results, ready to run through a wall. This is the guy you want.
Gas station ready. That's our guy Schlegs. Ohio State has a new offensive coordinator. The offseason's officially done.
Nope.
Right?
No.
Shoot.
Yeah, we're almost there. There could be some more opportunities for snap judgments, but it's trending in the direction of Matt Patricia sticking around. So we don't want to make a bold prediction on a snap judgment show, but it does feel like the pieces are falling in place for the coaching staff. There is about a week to go. Things to work out on that defensive side of the ball, not just with Matt Patricia, but Larry Johnson's contract status and his future. So there will be more to come. Promise you that. But this is a huge piece that has fallen into place for Ohio State with Arthur Smith coming in as the head coach of the offense, the offensive coordinator for Ryan Day. Thanks for joining us. A little emergency Snappy J on the weekend. He is Birm. I'm Austin. We'll have a lot more on this as we get back to the beat on Monday with Zach Bourne. So stay tuned for that. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. So long.